The internet is filled with a lot of weird, strange things, right? A lot of strange people. Hopefully some of those strange people are good people, and ultimately some of those strange good people can make lots of strange good media. Now, of course, we, as people who are a little bit older, who have been on the internet for a little bit amount of time, can really look at the modern stuff and be like, man, that's stupid. Kids are into stupid shit nowadays. But in truth, you know that back in the day, we were in some stupid shit. And what is more evocative of stupid shit that we were into that we're not sure why we were ever into in the mid-2000s than Homestuck. Homestuck, which started in 2009, is not the first creation of its creator, Andrew Hussey, who of course started to make little comics back in online discussion forums, ultimately starting this sort of choose-your-own-adventure type comic called Jailbreak in 2006, taking actual reader-submitted commands to use for this character. Jailbreak was goofy and weird, and it was a fun little experiment, a similar what would happen a little bit later, which Bard Quest, which never really lasted that long, but did have better art. It really came together with Problem Sleuth. Problem Sleuth ran over for 1,600 pages plus, which ultimately made it into this crazy, strange adventure. If you are into Homestuck or want to get into Homestuck, I'd recommend reading these first. It really shows you the slow progression of not just the art style, but also the comedy style of Andrew Hussey, and the fact that it's always been wacky and random, and also very clever, in sometimes the best and worst ways. Problem Sleuth also, references Jailbreak and Bard's Quest, and that was very funny the first time I read it, and also just is neat to see every time. I really love Problem Sleuth, genuinely. It goes just from some wacky dudes trying to solve some kind of weird crime, and then vaguely trying to defeat the main villain, but then the readers get in the middle of things and make everything worse. You can literally actually make the villain worse. It was very funny. Everything came together by the end, and everything worked to just be this weird, strange fucking thing. God, it's so fun. Problem Sleuth really showed the potential of what this kind of story could do, and it does seem that Andrew Hussey really took that idea and really ran with it. In 2009, continuing a very similar idea, but very quickly deciding to change it to something a little bit different, came Homestuck. You can really see the slight difference in design of characters, but still a recognizable sort of idea of design, which you could see from Andrew Hussey's other creations at that point. But really a style which would begin to shift and change thanks to the cute little designs of the characters in the beginning, which is ultimately about 4 kids, that being John, Dave, Rose, and Jade, who of course are the 4 major characters. People will tell you to skip the first 4 arcs, and those people are stupid, and we're stupid, and always will be stupid. Don't do that. These are the 4 main characters of the series, and the first 3 arcs are of course a little bit slow, mostly about the 3 of the 4 kids figuring out how exactly to work the game, and then slowly dealing with the world being destroyed because of their game. They're of course playing Spurb, this strange game which apparently affects reality, and apparently makes it so you've always been part of the game, or something like that. It's incredibly unclear, and that's just what Homestuck is, isn't it? Now, of course, I'm not going to be telling you every single detail about every part of Homestuck, because I don't have enough time in my life to do that, and God knows I don't have the, literal, no. Not at all. But the more important thing is I will talk about the important parts of Homestuck, why it was great, why it kind of stopped being as so, and why it's where it is right now, right? Just as a Homestuck fan, right? I was a big fan of Homestuck in high school, just probably right towards the end of its run, actually, and I really, really got into it. It became a part of my personality for a good, couple of years, right? And I just wanted to sort of relive Homestuck and just kind of see it off, a little bit, and that it might come to its conclusion pretty soon, actually, or something to that effect. But also just to sort of, talk to other people about Homestuck and be like, hey, remember that thing? I do too. So what is Spurb? Spurb is incredibly unclear what the hell you're even supposed to do, and for the first 3 acts of the comic, they don't make it ever clear, ever. Help the other players in almost like a square format of one person's able to click for the actual literal interactive reality of the other player, and that you're supposed to help them build their weird machines through their weird recipes, through probably looking through IGN for any ideas, because apparently there's an IGN guide. This series is weird, don't ask. But indeed slowly building upon the house more and more and more to eventually get into this alternate universe, to then get into your main planet, and then continuing building and building and building. The important parts here are twofold, which of course are majorly to get your characters to get strong enough equipment and to put in random shit in the sprites to then give that power and change the arena of the center, that being Skaya, not just with help of each other, but also one's dream selves, who of course are living on the 2 moons of Sky, that being Prospect and Durst, to basically be able to be strong enough to defeat the Dark King in order to basically win the game. That alongside other secondary objectives, of which the most important parts are find this weird goop thing and make a big giant frog, both of which are vaguely related, and then hope that you don't ruin your game in the process. But indeed, Act 1 through 3 are pretty, easily summarized of they begin to figure out what the game is, and they take a way longer time than you would think they do, as subtly John figures out what he needs to do, puts his shit in his sprite, that being the ashes of his literal grandma and a clown, making her the funniest sprite, let's be honest here, and then slowly get to his planet and then meet some funny salamander people, which of course he reenacts Con Air with. Again, don't ask, this series is weird, with Act 2 and 3 mostly being about Rose trying her hardest to do the same thing, with Dave, who is constantly harassed by his weird, strange brother, who's maybe kind of his dad, we'll talk about that in a minute, with his weird, creepy clown puppet, whose name is Little Cal, who is actively, I shit you not, the most important character of the entire series, with Act 3 mostly being about both that and also the other characters trying to figure out what they have to do next, as well as being helped by some other guys. Little intermissions, but not complete intermissions, as that's in a little bit, about these strange guys in what seems to be a separate different planet, which slowly we uncover is a destroyed Earth, because of course, as all the kids are playing this game, the Earth's about to be blown up by meteors. Some of which we find out later on are specifically not only coming from Skya, but also some of them went through different portals than the one that went to Earth, and some of them went through back in time in different parts of the timeline in order to ensure that the kids and their guardians are all born and are in the places that they are in their timeline. This firstly does 2 things which are very strange, which is A, basically ensuring that most of these characters are all related in some way. Check out this part of the chart, of which has a secondary part we'll talk about later. And thirdly, also shows you that the multiple weird bunnies that were part of this series, which are sent back and forth through the kids, are all the same exact rabbit, which is, again, the actual Con Air rabbit, which later becomes a sentient cyborg rabbit and helps the characters. The series is weird, don't ask. A full intermission actually does happen in between the major parts of the series, and that involving Spade Slick and the Midnight Crew, which I do believe are meant to be a little bit of a reference to Problem Sleuth, because I think they were made for Problem Sleuth originally, and they're dealing with these weird green guys, of which have a lot of their own weird powers, and it's probably my favorite part of the whole story, just because it's so fucking weird, and I just love the Midnight Crew. But you'd think, though, that might be just some random thing. It's actually very important, because all of it involves the leader of those creatures, which are leprechauns, by the way, which is Lord English, who seems to be this strange multidimensional demon, whom apparently fights Cthulhu demons off far away in space. The other exiles of the kids' Earth are able to help them move things throughout time. It's all weird and fun and complicated, but all of it ends up actually working against them, as ultimately one of the guys works against his queen and takes her powers to become Jack Noir, the destructor of their game. Dave's powers come into importance as ultimately he fucks up his own timeline, but he ends up going back in time and shifting that, as not only putting himself into his sprite, basically helping himself, which is very funny, but also stopping John from literally killing himself by, rocketing himself up into the gate to the next part of the game, as he was told to by one of these weird guys who were chatting with them a whole bunch. Wonder who those guys are. We'll get to them in a second. But indeed, Act 4 is really where stuff really starts to pick up, right? Not only does Jade start actually doing stuff, as we get to see through her how weird and strange the dream worlds are, and how important they are, and really what Skya looks like, but also the lore starts really coming together a little bit. The point of the game starts being a little bit clear. Time travel shit starts to be actually making a little bit more sense. John's dad, who is a separate character who has nothing to do with the whole clone thing, is actively around, and he starts having a relationship with, Rose's mom, which is kind of funny. She kicks ass, by the way, and so kind of does John's dad. Of course, the mentioned people who were basically responsible for John nearly killing himself actually, are whole other people who more of which start appearing, and boy, are all they incredibly weird. So Act 5 begins by literally introducing 12 new characters, and these 12 new absolute wacky weirdos, we go over all parts of their species' anatomy, relationship problems, lore on their world, and why they care so much about this, blood color hierarchy. And then there's, a clown cult, and fucking, oh my, what the fuck? It's just so weird. You got 12 whole new characters, all of which you have to learn about their backstories and their own guardians and how they shove them into their sprites, and there's a whole goop clone thing with them that Karkit's gotta do. He's the main one of them majorly. Act 1 of Act 5 ultimately is all about how these same exact 12 characters are doing their own version of Spurb, which is Scrub, because haha goofy alien guys, haha bucket. And they do a lot of dumb, wacky, goofy nonsense in the same way our other 5 characters did, but faster this time. And I get it. I get why people want to, like, make you go to Act 5, because it's a little bit more melodramatic, and that's interesting. Their planet is, of course, the one that Spade Slick is from, as it also gets absolutely destroyed, and they actively split up into teams because mostly Vriska, but, you know, just bad decisions. And they slowly are actually able to successfully get through their game. But guess who shows up? That's right, Jack Noir ruins their game and stops them from being able to get to their big prize. So ultimately, they gotta go into the game currently being played by the big frog that they created, which of course is the kids' game. They basically split up and decide what they want to do, and they never really fully agree on what they want to do. And Act 5, Act 2 is, of course, mostly about both half the trolls really filling us in on what the fuck they were doing throughout the first 4 acts, with their relationships slowly falling apart more and more, some of which you care about much less than others, and them slowly turning on each other and killing each other. Oopsie. Really, the most important deaths are how Gamzee basically fucking kills like half of the cast, and how Terezi and Vriska really hate each other, but also really like each other at the same time. As slowly we find out the reason why the Trolls games was all fucked up is because they fucked up the kids game, which allowed Jack Noir to happen in the first place. So in trying to stop him from existing, they made him exist, which, oopsie. What the kids are doing, of course, during this part are slowly uncovering their powers. John's the first to gain God mode, which is basically you do so after, like, I'm not quite sure why, but I know you die on, like, your dream bed and sacrifice bed and blah, 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 God mode, whatever. Trolls, at least who remains of the trolls, then start working with the kids to basically make the scratch happen, which allows their world to be flipped around, and for who went to the past and who went into the future thing to basically be swapped around, kinda. John initiates the scratch, and a certain goofball accidentally kills Jade, which basically allows Jack Noir to put her on her dream bed, which merges her with her dream sprite self, basically giving Jade crazy-ass universe morphing powers, which allows her to get the other groups out of there so they can continue to exist after the scratch. At that same time, a certain man who was accidentally created in a similar way of how Jade's dog was created, that being this cue ball-headed man, had basically been the person who had subtly been influencing the trolls this entire time, and is part of the reason why their plan went upward. He convinces Rose and Dave to go to a certain area, which they end up actively, though they think stopping the man in the Cario overcoat, end up being actively responsible for creating the big green sun, which powers all of the weird god-powered people, which also, of course, includes Lord English. All this is for some reason done by the destruction of 2 universes, that of course being the kids' universe, as Jack Noir slowly becomes a literal cancer within the universe, killing its frog, and also the Trolls universe, which is weirdly connected to their version of their Dark Queen, which is killed by Spade Slick, who is subtly influenced by the same cue ball-headed man, who PS for a little bit in the actual comic takes over the site, and that's probably one of my favorite parts of the whole comic, whom literally Andrew Hussey himself fucking murders, which ends up, like, releasing Lord English. This is actually very important that happens that way. Why? Well, wouldn't you know it? The weird god things are made by merging this weird white orb that gets power from the green sun and then merging it with something. And who else was he merged with but, of course, Little Cal. Is thanks to this explosion that happens by creating the green sun that our other 2 characters are also able to gain their god forms. But now with our other characters, after the crazy animation that people were so ready to see how crazy it was that it literally actually crashed Newgrounds, very, very notably so, Cascade ends Act 5, Act 2, and Act 5 in general, leading us into Act 6, Act 1. Part 3 of Homestuck begins with Act 6, Act 1. Act 6, Acts 1 through 5 are all about the new post-Scratch kids, that being Jane, Jake, Roxy, and Dirk, who of which are again the kid versions of the adults from the pre-Scratch Kids' universe. The pre-Scratch Kids' babies are now the adults of this new timeline, and they have their whole own other thing going on too, apparently, because strangely enough, though they're talking to each other as if they're both in the same part of the timeline, 2 of them, Roxy and Dirk, are from the future, for some reason, which of course has been interrupted by one of the Trolls' ancestors, who has been taken by Lord English and just shoved into this new post-scratch timeline. She's literally taken over with, and I shit you not, with A, help from Juggalos, and B, under the guise of Judy Crocker? Don't ask. Also, I think Guy Fieri is involved in some way. I don't know. But either way, shit's wacky, dog, and all of them basically begin to do the exact same thing that the other guys did, but now with even more melodramatic romances that get in the middle of things. They're both faster and also slower at the exact same time at doing exactly what the other kids do. They're in the acts, and each act is interrupted by an intermission, which of course shows you what exactly the other original kids are doing at this time, which is mostly sitting on a boat in between things. As well as subtly going into the, like, dead universe, because all the characters who were dead, of which there are many in multiple different alternate timelines, are all in just this, like, dead world, of which do include the pre-scratch version of the Trolls, because P.S. their ancestors actually have pre-scratch versions themselves. The pre-scratch Trolls mostly all suck, especially the two that canonically are meant to suck, and it's probably the worst part of the comic. In fact, a good chunk of Act 6 kind of is. Act 6, though at first it begins pretty good, and even like these characters and the relationships, it begins to fall apart in such a way where it just stops being entertaining, really. And that's not helped by Caliborn and Calliope. Caliborn and Calliope are characters I don't mind necessarily. They're cherubs, which are green skull creatures who apparently have two different personalities, and they literally have to fight to the death between each other to decide who is the leading personality. Obviously, it's Caliborn, because Calliope, now as a ghost, is kind of talking to the main characters, trying to help them in their journey. Caliborn, of course, just starts fucking with things as he ends up in a dead session of his own version of Spurb, which basically results in a fucking, like, a black hole, which gains him, like, crazy-ass powers. Alongside his faithful follower, again, Gamzee, the canonically worst of the Trolls, and then starts incorporating things which ruin the kids' game, both giving him the worst Trolls' dead bodies in order to shove into their sprites, which make them entirely pointless, except Equius, strangely enough. He also starts basically making their own version of Jack Noir, taking the post-scratch kids version of that guy, who was perfectly fine beforehand, before they literally make him gouge his eyeballs out and then turn him crazy, as well as give the kids some weird, strange lollipop, which makes them go all insane. And it just keeps going and 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 going. Stop it, please, I beg you! Until inevitably they all die and gain god forms, because they have to quickly speed that up. Eventually, the main kids are able to get to the main universe, and things start going very, very wrong. All of it really coalesces all together into Act 6, Act 1, as Caliborn kind of takes over the comic for a bit, making his own awful drawings and own awful recreations of the story. And what I feel is an even better and much more important animation than the one that broke Newgrounds, Game Over, is really the turning point of the series, which leads into its conclusion. A good majority of the cast is dead. It's literally just John and Roxy, like, wow. But eventually, John is able to find a different way to go back in time and change things, and thus he's basically able to fix things through some strange retcon power. With mostly Vriska's help, because for some reason the writer really, really, really likes Vriska. They're able to get the remaining actually competent Trolls together, start a fucking undead army to fight against Lord English, and that's so they can basically distract him to shove him somewhere. And they finally get themselves in the right area so they can be ready for their big final fights. Act 6, Act 5 is them getting everything ready in all their ways, sprites merging together to create crazy-ass super sprites. Them fixing out their relationships and being like, hey, let's not be weird about it. All coming together into what I feel is the absolutely fantastic Collide animation. What I feel is the best animation of the entire series. Collide is the amazing finale of the entire series. It's all done, right? It's the big, awesome final fight. It felt like it was worth it to really see this big final conclusion as it all comes together for the villains to finally be defeated. Like, in a genuine, actual finale type way, Collide is really where the ending happens for Homestuck. Everything's wrapped up, we're all in the heaven world, all of us, all the characters that mattered. And besides a little bit of updates through, like, Snapchat, apparently, the post-canon stuff, that was really it. Homestuck ran for 7 years, finally ending in April of 2016, basically, like, exactly 7 years to the day. It was done, right? It had its conclusion. There was one major plot thread, which wasn't really fully explained, which basically showed that indeed Locale was the most important character, but like a whole bunch of things weren't fully explained. Indeed, a whole bunch of stuff in terms of where characters were, what certain things came from, how this game even fucking worked in the first place, were never really fully explained, but that's fine. I didn't ask those same questions when I read through the entirety of Problem Sleuth. I didn't need to. There was a character arc that was finished for all of these important characters, the villains were defeated, there was an ending. That's what I cared about. I didn't need everything answered, and part of me didn't want it all to be answered, because it felt like maybe there shouldn't be answers to certain things, because it might not be a good answer. And indeed, yeah, it wasn't. April 13th, 2019, exactly 10 years after Homestuck started, and basically nearly 3 years after it ended, the epilogues came out, and with help of other writers, Hussey basically made a big epilogue to the series, splitting off into 2 separate timelines, one of which actually answered that question on how exactly the characters got to that point, where they were during that little scene that we saw in Claymation, but that more importantly, a separate timeline which continued the characters where they left off and what happened to the human and troll relations afterwards. It's weird and melodramatic as fuck, but it's actually very enjoyable, at least I think so. You know, as someone who really enjoys Smallville, I like melodramatic versions of shit that shouldn't be melodramatic. But I feel like that could have been it, right? But clearly, the epilogues weren't meant to be actual epilogues. They are a way to Hussey to basically hand off the series, a passing of a torch, to a new group of people. By October of that year, Homestuck 2 Beyond Canon, which would later be renamed Homestuck Beyond Canon, the semi-official sequel to the series, would be started, and that's kind of where the series began to fall out, right? There, of course, is a whole thing about how exactly the video game's Hive swap never really worked out, mostly thanks to the Odd Gentleman, whom just kind of didn't really work well with the people that they were working with. But it's really just important to mention it because the Homestuck fandom, you know, was not only much more grown up at this point and wasn't really hanging on to every single word of, will there be another update? Will there be something else? Because at this point, the plot was done. Why continue it? Either way, the fandom began to really turn on the people making this franchise, especially when it came to Homestuck 2 Beyond Canon. Again, why continue this thing? And honestly, I was the exact same mindset when it came down to it, right? The prologues really built up the importance of what was going on in this world, and they never were able to firmly establish why we should care. It ended up just being more of the same thing. A lot of stuff that was really just a lot of wasting time, and that's what Homestuck 2 ended up really being. Of course, it ended up almost kind of coming down in February 2021, where ultimately Homestuck kind of just shut down, right? Its Patreon was just sort of done, and God knows there's still no plans for any sequels for any of these games. Finally, strangely enough, the 2 part of it was dropped in 2023, and they've been making steady releases ever since. Homestuck 2, though it's not Homestuck 2 anymore, is an official continuation of this plotline, and I do hope fans really do enjoy it. And with a whole new creative team being kind of overlooked by Andrew Hussey, who was really just began to focus on his own things, Homestuck Beyond Canon really seems to hopefully beginning to work on its own things, and it really plays on what really made the original Homestuck as interesting as it was. In truth, strange enough, that was the original point of my video back in 2021, when I made one, which of course is no longer up, right? I didn't do it on purpose, but when the thing did shut down, I thought, well, might as well make it kind of about that, right? But now that it's continued, I'm very interested. Am I going to read Beyond Canon? I'm not sure. I do hope that Homestuck and its fans continue making something genuinely great, and that's cool and all, but it's not quite what I really enjoyed, right? It really became a part of my personality back in high school, right? Homestuck was just this strange new thing of using what the internet was and what it was like and how it worked back in the day, back in high school, when I was reading out my friggin' laptop in the middle of class, when I probably shouldn't have been, and should have been paying more attention to math, right? But I was much more paying attention to Homestuck and its weird shit and its fandom and all of its cool creations. I loved it. It's just such a fun time looking back at that point and looking at what we were all making at that time, all the cool animations and cosplay and different creations and stuff, and how it inevitably led to this like bigger franchise, which got like fucking whole big official video games and stuff, right? It clearly always wanted to be a video game. It even had video game parts of it, which again don't work properly anymore because of Flash and stuff, right? The internet's literally shifted so much since even the end of Homestuck that the Homestuck doesn't even work properly anymore. The embeds aren't even working properly anymore. It's really easy to look at what Homestuck was going through in 2021 and really just like shit all over it and be like, Was it ever really good? When in truth, it was. And let's just face that fact, alright? For the exact same reasons, you can look at a bunch of stuff that were popular in high school that were clearly unpopular with other people only because they saw it and realized they didn't want to like it. So unless they just went and said that it was shit, so unless it became popular to hate on it. Homestuck's one of those things, alright? For the same reason Skrillex was, and why going to a music festival and getting high off my ass on acid in the middle of a Skrillex concert really helped me appreciate Skrillex and say fuck people who don't want to like Skrillex for no actual reason. That's what I'm doing the same with Homestuck. Not on acid this time though, but I would gladly. Homestuck was good. It was good from the start. It was this funny, clever, cute little animated comic which had funny little parts here and there as the audience began to slowly understand, and even when the control was taken away from them, they slowly also began to understand alongside the writer. Hussey clearly didn't have any idea what he wanted to do over time, but also he wanted to make something creative, and I can fully understand that. Homestuck, honestly, in general, is the reason why I like certain things, why I like certain styles of writing, and it's really what got me into wanting to be a writer in the first place. Straight up. I want to write things, and even if I wouldn't write like Homestuck anymore, because my sense of like quality of story and comedy has changed since then, certainly, but it's this kind of thing that made me interested in doing this kind of thing in the first place, of talking about things that I enjoy and wanting to make stories off of what I enjoy. And it wouldn't be that way if it weren't for Homestuck. It's wild and weird and creative, and Homestuck would not be where it was if it weren't for its fandom, which even as weird and strange as they were, it is thanks to them that this series began to continue onward, and hopefully does continue onward. Everything should probably have its conclusion, and maybe Homestuck shouldn't go on for too long, and God knows I don't want for it to go forever, and hopefully the people behind this current story have an actual conclusion, but still though, Homestuck was not some dumb cringy thing we enjoyed when we were younger. It's a fun, cool story. I think the series, despite all of its flaws, which are definitely there, is an enjoyable time that by the end made everything worth it. It's a great fun story which has so much weird, intricate aspects to it that as it goes on, it builds on top of itself. And due to the fact that it was just as this flash in a pan, off the top of your head, weird ideas, over time type of thing from the author who just wanted to have some fun, that's what makes it great. Is it high art? Maybe. It's got some fantastic actual art with various artists that did a lot of great shit with it. It's due to this that lots of people got their start on the internet and are making stuff right now that lots of people enjoy because of that. So much to the point that it literally references that stuff as it went on. Well, maybe looking back at certain parts, it's aged a little bit because it was just from a certain time on the internet. But not only is it a great capsule on how the internet was at a certain time, just how we messaged each other, how we talked to each other, how things were, but it's still a very fun story that slowly builds off of each other, and it's a great showing of creativity and imagination from its genuinely great guy of a creator, but shows you that regardless of what you do in your life, you can always be successful if you just put your mind to it and put your creativity on paper and just go with it. There are certain parts that maybe feel a little bit self-indulgent throughout Homestuck, but they fucking need to, and I don't care, because sometimes it's fine to just shove your ego sometimes, right? Just be weird, just be creative. Don't make fun of things because you're like, oh, that's weird, that's lame. No, fuck you. And that's Homestuck to me. Homestuck is a big fuck you, in a good way. But that's kind of the thing about the internet, man. There's lots of things that I feel like are really popular to hate on for whatever reason, and people just do it because they feel like they have to do it. It's not something that they would personally enjoy, or it's not the thing that they want to enjoy. So they have to dogpile on every single thing that they just seemingly don't want to really think about, and they have to assume that it's something cringe or bad or for babies. And there is stuff that's absolute garbage, but sometimes there's stuff that is weird and as maybe stupid as it is, people enjoy it. And if you have to learn anything from Homestuck, it is be who the fuck you are. Maybe you're stupid. You're probably very cringeworthy, but just fuck it, dude. Be who the fuck you are, and that's the important thing. People aren't gonna like that. People aren't gonna like you, and fuck them. Just fuck them. Fuck them no matter what the fuck you are, because you want to be you. If you're not hurting anybody and committing genuine actual crimes, do whatever the fuck you want. Make yourself happy. Write your stupid ass story about your stupid ass characters doing stupid ass things, right? And don't be an asshole and randomly hate on things because it's not what you enjoy. And try and ruin the fucking lives of the creators of said animations or shows or what have you because you don't like the thing. Leave it the fuck alone. Be you. Be unarguably and unquestionably you. And Homestuck is a good showing of that. Andrew Hussey is a genuine inspirational person because he just does whatever he wants to do. And he says, fuck you. And it was this once very, very clearly self-indulgent thing that I saw on there, which I really hated at the time when it came out. But as I look back on it, I still don't like how it looks because it just looks so weird. But also, I understand what it is. Because Homestuck probably at that point for a lot of people was that cringeworthy thing you liked back when you were younger. When in truth, you know what? You liked it for a reason. Because it was fun. Because it was a great time. And it was something made of a lot of heart by a lot of people all together. That started with one man who made something because he wanted to make it. Live your life doing what you want to do, create what you want to do, and don't let someone think that you're weird for doing it. Homestuck teaches us so much about the actual person and how people's lives change us and how others' opinions nearly ruin our lives and how our actions can affect other people. Homestuck is so much smarter than a lot of people give it credit for. Maybe it's melodramatic at times, but it genuinely affected a lot of people for the right reasons. It tackled genuine real-life topics in such a way that I didn't fully understand, but as I'm reading it, I realize were done very well. Homestuck shows us that we will make mistakes. We'll make lots of mistakes. We will make mistakes that will ruin relationships, will ruin our reputation with certain people, that maybe we can't really hide from those mistakes, but we need to move on from those mistakes, that we can move on from those mistakes, more importantly. There will be people who will try to stop us from succeeding, but that is unimportant because we still need to try anyway. And even if it's not in some kind of evil villainy way, or hell, even if it is, because people like that do exist, Homestuck teaches us that we can always become a better person, that we can always change, and that we are able to succeed despite everything. Through its wacky, weird world of living in a video game, it told you all about how complicated and harsh life and relationships are, and how your actions affect other people, and how they will affect your life. Some people will not like you ever again because of your actions, how your life will be shifted entirely because of your interactions with other people. But that regardless of what you do, you can always change as a person. You can always make your life better and other people's lives better by just being you. You can always get better as a person. You can always change, but that doesn't mean you should ever stop being you. You're a bit of a weird spidery bitch, and maybe you should learn how to try to incorporate others into your lives and let people in and not be so mean about it. But that doesn't mean you should ever not stop being a weird, crazy, spidery bitch. People have shat on you and have made your life actively worse because they never liked you and they probably never will. But that doesn't mean that no one will. That doesn't mean you shouldn't still keep trying to open up to other people. And you shouldn't stop trying to get other people to become your friends and to live your life the way you want to live. People are not going to accept you for who you are, probably because of where you came from or where you want to go. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to succeed in life. You shouldn't be afraid of what you've done in the past and how it might keep you to where you are now, because you can always change as a person, and your past does not define you. Your future does, and you shouldn't be worried about the potentials of that future, and just live in the now. There's always a goal to accomplish, but that doesn't mean that you should always constantly rush towards that goal, because your friends are living right now. There's important relationships that you can't just ignore and forget about because that will not make your life better. Your relationships and your goals will not be as successful as you want them to be if you let something horrible ruin your life and ruin your mind. This, and that right there is the reason why our main four are the main four. Jade never really holds it against anyone, really, in terms of what happens to her in any way, and always tries to make peace with everyone around her. John never really hates his brother despite everything he did to him, and by the end of the series really tries to move on from all of it and just try to live his life the way he wants to live it. Rose has a whole arc of trying to get over dark thoughts which have tried to change her and try to make her a worse person and try to keep the peace between everybody, finding actual love in the process with someone that she thought she never really fully enjoyed. Maybe kind of same for Carcat? But also, of course, just John. John the entire time never really lets anything get to him. He is always here for the adventure, for the present, and though he's not like a unreasonable person because he has emotions and he does understand the actual events that are happening here, but he never lets it rule his life. He never lets it completely ruin his mood, and he's always trying to find the best part of the situation. Good and genuinely realistic showings, even before the epilogue stuff, of both healthy and unhealthy relationships and people dealing with them and moving on as people despite all that. I hate when people say that any of these characters are bad because of what they did, when in truth a bad character is a badly written character, like fucking Eric, because he never really expands as a character in really any way. Well, Dirk, he has his whole thing going on there, but he learns from his actions, he learns from making mistakes, and he learns from his bad relationship with Jake, as does Jake, and by the end, they reconcile all of that. Everyone grows as characters in ways that a lot of people don't want to give this series credit for. Is despite all the weird and wacky shit that happens in this series, it teaches you lessons. It gives you a real good idea of what to do with life, to just be unapologetically you. Maybe some of this is right off the top of the head of Hussey, but then you really get to certain things, and certain things in the past and why they were there become more clear. Because Homestuck, as life goes, isn't a great ride the entire time. You need bad parts. You need those slow parts that you don't enjoy because they aren't some funny, wacky nonsense. Because they do show relationships that aren't really great and are clearly toxic. And show you parts where the main character isn't in his element and really isn't having a great time. You need that in order for the great parts to be even better. You need that character growth. A story isn't a great story unless it has moments that really do give you a wide variety of emotions, and Homestuck is one of those kinds of stories. Through all of its strange oddities, gives you so many different kinds of emotions as you read through it. And you cannot be a complete person unless you have a life filled with sadness and pain and bad things happening to you, because if you don't have that, then you don't fully understand what the good parts are. It is living through that and not letting that rule you as a person that allows you to fully understand and enjoy the good parts of life. That is the kind of stuff that Homestuck taught me. Though I didn't fully understand it till many years later, that is the kind of story that Homestuck is, and is a fun time from start to finish. Homestuck is art. Homestuck is one of the longest stories out there, not the, and maybe not the best written, but through a wide variety of mediums, through this incredibly long, ongoing plot, which, hell, technically isn't done yet. Hopefully by the end of its sort of but not really sequel, does it really give an even better conclusion? And hell, if it does, maybe I'll make a follow-up video. But there's a reason why people want to make this sequel. There's an answer to why keep making a sequel, because Homestuck clearly didn't just affect me. It affected so many people in a positive way, and hopefully will continue doing so in the future. If you enjoyed the video and you kind of understand where I'm coming from, make sure you leave a like and leave a comment on your favorite part of Homestuck. Most importantly, of course, if you enjoy this video, I make a whole bunch others all the time, every couple of weeks, hopefully, and make sure you subscribe and check all that stuff out. But most importantly, stay good, stay safe, and don't be an asshole.